and truth, I see that God shows no partiality. As we hear these words from Peter, how often people wonder if they're actually true. And why do I say that? I hear so often from people about the reality of how, bad things happen to good people, and if God truly loved us, He would never allow that to happen. But that's simply not true. Unfortunately, the human condition and free will get in the way of all of that kind of stuff. But it goes even deeper than that. If we want to truly recognize that God shows no partiality, we simply need to look at the people that God has chosen to be, His representatives. We start with Abraham, our father in faith, who, many times was a little dishonest, especially when he was afraid of getting into trouble. Sound familiar to any of us? Rather than tell people that Sarah was his wife, he dissembled, and in that almost got the Pharaoh of Egypt in trouble with God. We look to Moses, who was a murderer, who was chased out of Egypt because he was afraid of being put to death. We look to Rahab, who was a prostitute. We look to, the apostles. And let's be really honest, this collection of 12, I know we all kind of look at him as this big saint now, but let's just really think about, would these people have been the ones we would have chosen to begin a church? If you're really honest with yourself, you would probably say no. As we look through the whole history of salvation, God seemed to keep picking people who don't quite fit who we think are sort of the perfect person. We just have to look at another, King David, the greatest king of Israel, who again committed adultery and then killed the husband. And yet he was the king that God chose. In fact, the way God described David was, he was always I was always in his heart. As we look at human beings, we look at them in a particular way. And God even tells us that as he chose David to be king. Human beings choose by appearance, I by the heart. And so as God shows no partiality, it means just what that means. And again, we can see it further with Jesus, beyond the apostles. He chose to have dinner with sinners, with prostitutes, with tax collectors. For us in this day and age, having dinner does not have quite the same meaning as it did at the time of Jesus. The person you ate with said something about who you were, who you associated with. And Jesus was associating with, what we might today call the dregs of society. That's who he chose to eat with. Again, these are the people most likely we would reject in our lives, wanting no part of them. And yet again we hear Peter that God shows no partiality. Why? Because again, we judge by the appearance and God judges by the heart. God looks to the potential of the person. And yes, Abraham may have lied from time to time, but his faith in the Lord was shown with what he chose to do with his son Isaac. Moses returned to the land where he could possibly have been put to death to fulfill the will of the Lord. David would create a kingdom that would truly seek to follow the will of God. As we look at all of these, we see the potential that God sees. And he sees that same potential in each and every one of us. We are not here because we are the perfect. If you think you are, I think you need to look at the mirror again. We are here because we are the chosen. But not just us alone. All are chosen by the Lord. For the Lord sees the potential in every single person. That potential that they cannot see within themselves. Of what it is they are truly capable of. But it comes down to this. And remembering this. It was not you who chose me, but I who chose you and appoint you to go and bear fruit that will remain. That is a powerful statement. Essentially, God has placed his trust in you. But not just for anything. To bring his message, his love into the world. And we all have the capacity to do that in different ways. We're not all called to be the same or to act in exactly the same way. But we all are called to that same reality of bearing fruit for Christ. It's so easy to write someone off. It's so easy to see what is wrong with them and to see what we dislike, to focus on the appearance. May we choose instead to act like the Lord. May we recognize why we have been chosen. May we seek to bear fruit, and may we seek to reach our potential of bringing Christ into the world. May we seek to show no partiality for anyone we meet in our lives.